couple weeks ago, I received an email, and it was from a couple who shared about how one of their kids had totally walked away from Jesus. And in the midst of just sharing their story, they had this penetrating question at the end. They said, "What advice would you offer us?" Now, this is not the first time I have gotten this question. This is not the first time I've been posed with this scenario. In fact, this is a conversation that I've regularly had with parents in the past. And it is a painful conversation to have because no parent wants to see their child walk away from Jesus Christ, to walk into things that are just hindering their lives. And it's so difficult to get to that place where you go, I don't know what to do. And so I've gotten this question asked to me a number of times, especially even within the last 6 months or so. And invariably in the conversations, Luke 15 comes up. I mean, they're actually using language like, my child is a prodigal. And maybe the child still lives within their own home, but they don't want to listen to anything. They don't want to go to church. They want nothing to do with faith. In other cases, these are kids who, maybe late teens or early 20s, and they've gone off to college, or even they've graduated from college and they've just kind of gone off and done their own thing. And parents are going, we just don't know what to do. How do we love our kids well? How do we serve them well? They are walking away, and we are just so unbelievably scared. And so in this episode, I want to address this because I believe that the parable lends itself to this kind of a conversation. And so this is going to be super pastoral. It's going to be very much in the parenting vein. And I do want to throw a disclaimer up front, and that is this. Whenever you are offering parenting advice, it is a super sensitive issue. And I totally understand that. I've got 4 kids under the age of 12. We're not experiencing any prodigalness in our house yet, and I hope that is never something that we have to deal with. And when we do have to deal with it, if we have to deal with it, we're going to have to be wise and discerning to figure out what to do and when to do what at the right time. And so this is not universal. This is not a one-size-fits-all. Everybody's story is different. Everybody's situation is different. But there is a concept that has been helpful to me in my life. And as I think through how I've sought to help other parents out, how I think through this particular story in Luke 15, it warrants a conversation. And so that's what we're going to do here in part 4 of the parable of the lost son. And as we have explored in the previous episodes, you have to look at the parable in Luke 15 of the lost son, or traditionally known as the prodigal son, in connection to the lost sheep and the lost coin. And so for those of you who've been following along with the series, you are aware of how all 3 of these stories are working together. And so if you just kind of step back from these 3 stories for a moment, and you look at the story of the lost sheep, you recognize that the shepherd left the 99, not all alone and, to fend for themselves. We talked about how there would have been an under shepherd, somebody else to take care of the 99. But that shepherd pursued that lost sheep. That in the story of the lost coin, the woman pursued that lost coin. But when you look at the parable of the lost son, the father doesn't go after the prodigal. He lets him go. And in the last episode, we looked at the story primarily through the eyes of the younger son. And one of the things that we talked about is that when the younger son asks for his share of the inheritance, that was tantamount to saying to the father, I no longer want to be in relationship with you. I no longer want to be associated with you. Like, it's fine for me if you just die, because all I want is my inheritance and I want to go do what I want to do. Now, as Jesus is telling this story, I believe that what Luke has provided to us in Luke 15 is what Jesus said. And one of the things that if you were just thinking, okay, Jesus didn't give us additional details about what happened after the son asked for his inheritance and the time frame when the son actually left town, because as we've explored, the son had to receive his inheritance, he had to liquidate his inheritance. Like, this was not something that just happened, in a 24-hour time period and then he was like out. It was probably several days, if not several weeks. And you just wonder, like, what would the father's conversations have been like with the younger son? One of the things that I find when it comes to parables and interpretation and everything is that sometimes I think we make too much out of the parables. Like, we try to make the parables say more than what they're intended to say. And oftentimes when I hear other people talking about parables and doing that, oftentimes it's because it's totally devoid of context, which always makes me uneasy. But there is a sense to parables that you are to wrestle with them. Like, all of its intimate meaning is not immediately available to us. Like, Jesus told parables so that we would wonder, that we would ponder, that we would wrestle, that we would consider. And any time that we're looking at, facets of the parable that aren't just explicitly given, I don't think it's helpful to say this is exactly what is going on and we know that for certain. In more cases than not, saying something along the lines of, perhaps this is what is going on, or I'd like to submit to you that this is a possibility. And so I'd like to do that here. I think that, if there was more details to the story, that the father probably had some conversations with the younger son. But what we do get, the most important details, is that the father doesn't actually go after the younger son. And I believe that there's an idea here that is at the essence of what I want to tackle in this episode. And it's the idea of this. It's the idea of love as letting go. That what we see in the 99 and the one that left is that the shepherd pursued. That in the woman and the lost coins, she pursued. But the father didn't pursue. And for some of us just hearing this, that's probably a little bit disconcerting. It's maybe a little bit frustrating. It maybe causes us to wonder, why did the father not push back? Why did he actually divide the inheritance? Why did he grant the right for the younger son to then liquidate his inheritance? Why didn't the father take a more active stance in getting his son to understand or to stick around, or, why didn't the father do more? And one of the things that I've come to believe in this story is that I believe that one of the reasons why the father let the younger son go is because he recognized his son was already lost in his own home. And that the father recognized that I have done everything that I can, but now the loving thing to do is not to hold on white-knuckled. It's not to try to coerce and manipulate the situation and get my son to do what I want him to do. It was that I believe the father recognized that the most loving thing he could do for his son was to actually let him go. And that in letting him go, it was the only chance he would possibly get to having his son ever come back home. I read a number of years ago an amazing book by Henry Nouwen, and it's called The Return of the Prodigal Son. And it is just an amazing book where he just devours, inhales Luke 15, and then just shares all of this wisdom and insight that he sees in the story. And Henry Nouwen said something very similar on page 44. And he said this about the father. He said the father couldn't compel his son to stay home. He couldn't force his love on the beloved. He had to let him go in freedom, even though he knew the pain it would cause both his son and himself. It was love itself that prevented him from keeping his son home at all cost. And it was love itself that allowed him to let his son find his own life, even with the risk of losing it. Such an insightful quote there. And and this is what I share with parents when they have walked me through everything that they have done. And as I just sit back and listen to what they're sharing, I'm thinking, there isn't anything else that you could have done or that you can do to try to convince them to stick around, to come home, to walk back into the faith, to trust Jesus, to, see things differently. And when I've gotten to that point in that story of listening to what they're sharing, this is what I share with them. I say, listen, it sounds like you have done everything you can and have to give your child the best understanding of what you believe to be true, of what you believe is the right direction for them to take. And now, the most loving thing you can do is to actually let them go. And friends, I know that thought, that idea is scary. It's risky. But friends, love is risky at its core. Love, true love, is not manipulated. It is not forced. It is not coerced. It does not have an agenda. We love to simply love. But any kind of love like that is risky. It's risky because you may love them and let them go, and they may never come back. You may love them, they may not love you back. Love at its very core is risky. And sometimes, friends, the most loving thing we can do is just let someone go. Now, in doing so, that doesn't mean that we don't continue to pray fervently for them. That doesn't mean that we cut off all contact with them. Every situation is different. Every situation requires discernment. But what I just want to offer to you is for those of you who are just at your wit's end, when you have just found yourselves going, I don't know what else to do, maybe this is what you are called to do now. And one of the things that I so love about this parable and how Jesus tells it and just how we see God in the Father in this story is that the Father recognized he had to let his son go because his son was lost in his own home. But the Father was on his edge waiting for that prodigal to turn around and start walking home. And as we explored in the last episode, what's so compelling about this story is the extravagant mercy, grace, love, and forgiveness of the Father to run after the younger son, to wrap his arms around him, and to embrace him, to let him know he is always welcomed home. And friends, that is the posture that I believe that we are always called to take, that we are always called to be with open arms, and that in having to let someone go that is going to be so painful for us to do, is to never lose hope that we will be able to embrace them once again as they have found their way home in the grace and the mercy from God. And so, friends, I hope this is helpful to you. I hope that you ponder this. What does this mean? What does this look like? How is the Holy Spirit speaking to you? This has primarily been in a parenting vein, but I also believe this is true in any kind of strained relationship we have with maybe our parents, or if we have a strained relationship with a dear friend and we've just tried everything we can, that sometimes the most healthy thing we can do, the most loving thing we can do is to stop grasping, to stop trying to control or coerce in love to get them to do, and just have an open hand approach and just say, I love you so much, I am willing to let you go. But just know that I am here with open arms. So friends, may you wrestle with this. May the Holy Spirit lead you on how this may be applicable to your specific situations. May we be reminded that this is a God who always welcomes us back with open arms, that this is a God who, yes, pursues, but he doesn't barge in. And may we, in the best possible way, reflect the impulse of the Father to those in our lives who may be struggling significantly. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for listening. And may we walk out this text well in our lives.